Predictions, predictions, predictions. Yes, it is that time of the year again when all the launches are out of the way, testing is in the books, and now all Formula 1 fans are trying to predict the outcome of the up-and-coming World Championship as to where all the teams are going to finish and which driver is going to become World Champion in 2025. But trying to predict the outcome of the season ahead before the first race is damn near impossible, because between now and Abu Dhabi, so much could change and probably will change. But what the hell, it's a bit of fun. I might just look back at the end of the year and find out that my predictions were mostly right. So probably not, but let's give it a go anyway. So here are my predictions for the 2025 Formula 1 season, and we're going to start off where each team is going to finish in the Constructors' Championship. In 10th place, I've decided to go with Sauber. I think that coming out of the test, I think definitely Sauber look as though they're going to be propping up the rear of the grid. I think while they have definitely made some progress over the winter, I think there's no doubt they ended obviously 2024, difficult 2024, a lot more positively. They were quite competitive in Qatar, where they obviously scored points, and then they were quite competitive in Abu Dhabi as well. So they'll definitely be hoping that they can carry that momentum into this season. But I still think that they're not going to be in a position to really challenge even the top of the midfield, let alone the front runners. So I think for them, their main focus really is on 2026, when they obviously will transition into Audi. And I think that that's really what their main focus is. I think that this is really a building year for them as they sort of lay the foundations for Audi to come in 2026 and try and hit the ground running. One thing in their favour obviously is that they've got a solid driver lineup, with the experience of Hülkenberg coupled with the youth of Bortoleto, who I think is a really exciting driver, obviously reigning F2 champion, won that back-to-back with his F3 championship the year before. So it is a very solid lineup, and I think that they'll work quite well together actually. I think that Bortoleto will really learn a lot of Hülkenberg, so I expect it to be a good pairing. And as for who I think will finish ahead in the championship out of the two drivers, do you know what? I'm going to go with Bortoleto, because I think that Hülkenberg will have his customary bad luck in the races where Sauber maybe have a chance of scoring points, or have one of his off races. He only has a couple of off races a season. So I'm going to go with Bortoleto to finish ahead of Hülkenberg in the championship. P9, I've decided to go with Racing Bulls. Now I think that this year they're going to actually take a slight step backwards from 2024, when they obviously finished 8th in the World Championship at the end of the year. 2025 I see as being a little bit of a difficult year. Certainly coming off the back of testing, they didn't really set the world alight, did they? They didn't look terrible, but they just didn't look that quick. You could just sort of tell the car doesn't really give me a good feeling. It doesn't give me confidence that they're going to be in that sort of fight at the top of the midfield. They're going to be sort of fighting with Sauber at the back of the grid. I think what will help is that they obviously have a closer relationship with Red Bull. That will obviously allow them to develop the car over the season, take certain parts from Red Bull and put them on their own car. So I certainly expect Racing Bulls to score points, but I think it will be a bit of a difficult year for them. As for the two drivers, who's going to finish ahead of who? I think without a doubt this one is probably one of the easy ones. Yuki Tsunoda should have the upper hand on Isaac Hadjar. Hadjar is definitely quick, but I think test he really did look like a rookie driver during the test, a couple of mistakes here and there, and I do think he's a bit erratic. So I'm expecting that Yuki's experience and growing maturity will have the upper hand in this battle. Now for P8, I've made a bit of a last minute change here. I wasn't sure between two of the teams, but in the end I have gone with Haas. It was a close run thing with one of the other teams who I'll come on to, who I've decided to put P7 instead. There's no doubt 2024 was a fantastic year for them in their first year under Aya Komatsu. He was a breath of fresh air for the team. It was absolutely needed after they decided to split with Gunter Steiner. Obviously he took a completely different approach to the team principal role, and I think it really refreshed the team, reinvigorated them, and we saw that in the fact that they almost finished P6. They just lost out to Alpine in Abu Dhabi, but nevertheless they made so much progress in 2024, particularly solving those tyre issues that they had in 2023 that left them at the bottom of the championship. And having got on top of those, they were regularly scoring points, fighting some of the other teams who have not only got a bigger budget, but they've obviously got more resources and a much wider team as well, because of course Haas still have the smallest team by numbers. Now obviously in testing they focus mainly on certain areas such as setup, pit stop, practice, looking at the operational side of the team. That's something that they decided to really focus on the majority of the test. Nevertheless, that doesn't mean that Haas are looking like they're in trouble. It's a tight midfield, but I think that they will just fall back a little bit from last year. As for the driver lineup, they've got a really interesting dynamic with Esteban Ocon and Ollie Behrman. This really is, for me, the most competitive driver lineup in terms of how close they're going to be over the season. I think this one's quite tough to call. as to who's going to finish ahead of who. On balance, even though I think Ollie is certainly a really, really talented driver and someone certainly we've got to look out for the future, I think his experience will just show and just give him that small advantage that he needs. So I'm going to go with Ocon to finish ahead of Behrman. So who is the team that I switched around with Haas at the last minute? Well, it is Aston Martin. I think that Aston Martin are in for a difficult season. Testing didn't fill me with a lot of hope that they're going to hold on to that 5th place that they've held for the last 2 years. Obviously last year was a difficult year as well because they clearly digressed from what they showed in 2023 when Alonso was fighting for podiums, and at one point Aston had the second fastest car in 2023. They were nowhere near that last year, and I don't think they'll be any closer this year. I certainly think that other teams are actually looking in better shape going into this year. I suppose for Aston are probably going to be one of those teams are going to shift focus to 2026 earlier than others, certainly with Adrian Newey coming on board. But I certainly expect that they will have a trickier season than they have done over the last couple of seasons. Then as for the drivers, who's going to finish ahead of who? I think you all know that I'm going to go with Alonso over Stroll. I don't think we need to go too much into detail over this. Alonso, even at 43 years old, is still driving at the top of his game. I certainly expect that will continue on into this year. As for Stroll, he really does need to up his game in 2025. Last year, he really was so poor, particularly in the second half of the season. He didn't score a point after Spa, I don't think, so he really does need to find some form soon. But yes, I'm going to go with Alonso to finish ahead of Stroll. Now, I think one of the biggest talking points coming into this year is who is going to be able to win the fight to finish best of the rest behind the top 4 teams. And I think 2 teams in particular are going to be the lead contenders for that position. In 6th place, I've decided to go with Alpine. I think that the test was really positive for Alpine. I think compared to 12 months ago, it's like chalk and cheese. You know, last year was such a difficult start to the season for them. In testing, they looked just so slow. The car was overweight. They really did look in trouble. And sure enough, in Bahrain, they were clearly the slowest team. So the fact that they were able to develop the car and completely transform their season, where by the end they had a double podium in Brazil, really was quite something, and it was quite an achievement to finish P6 in the standings. So the fact that they are on the pace and they look a really solid foundation, I think they've got a really solid car. It's credit to the whole team that they've managed to turn around what was a difficult situation 12 months ago. Alpine are one of those teams that have got an eye on 2026, but I think that they see 2025 as a massive opportunity to finish behind those top 4 teams as best of the rest. So I think looking at the car and testing, there's certainly definitely potential that they can finish in that 5th place. But I think what will let them down, certainly at the start of the season, will maybe possibly be their driver lineup, and that obviously is a big talking point, isn't it? I think a lot of people are expecting that Doohan will not last long in that seat. We obviously know that his contract is only for 6 races. Would he even last those 6 races? Who knows? Obviously, hopefully for his sake, he does get a fair crack at it and is given a chance alongside Gasly. But as for who's going to finish ahead of the championship, I think regardless of whether it's Doohan or Colapinto who sees out the season, Gasly is going to be their number 1 driver and will finish as the top Alpine driver in the championship. So that means for P5 I have gone with Williams. Out of all the teams that have come out of the test, I think they are certainly the happiest and probably the most surprising and maybe most impressive as well. The car is a major step forward from last year. They had a really difficult season in 2024 when they spent more time crashing than scoring points, and that really derailed their season. We also know that in the past they've turned up to pre-season testing on the back foot where the car isn't quite ready, and it leaves them chasing the others. They're on the back foot and already they're a step behind everyone else. There was obviously no signs of that, and that is a big plus for them. It shows just where Williams are going and obviously aiming to go as well. They've got obviously big ambitions, particularly for 2026. They're one of the teams that will be focusing on 2026 the most. But I've got to say that the car does look quick. It looked quite competitive on race runs. So I think that there really is a real good foundation laid for Williams to make 2025 their best season since 2017. That's when they last finished in the top 5 in the championship. So I've got really big hopes for Williams that they're going to make a huge leap forward from 2024. And what obviously helps is the fact they've got one of the strongest lineups on the grid now, with Carlos Sainz obviously coming in, teaming up with Alex Albon. That's going to be a really exciting dynamic, and I think they really are going to help Williams take that step to fighting near the front of the grid. And then as for the head-to-head, who's going to finish ahead in the championship? I think I am going to go with Sainz. I don't think he's going to completely blow Albon out of the water. I think Albon will give him a good run for his money, but Sainz will have the edge. So now we come on to the big 4 teams, and I have found it really tricky as to where to place some of them. I think it's going to be so ultra competitive between all of them. All of them are surely going to have a chance of winning races, and be in with a shout at winning the World Championship. It's just simply going to be down to who really is able to develop their car best and keep an advantage over their rivals. So who am I going to put in P4? Well, I've decided to go with Red Bull. It was a close run thing between them, Mercedes and Ferrari. In the end, I've decided to go with Red Bull. I just think that they're not going to enjoy as competitive year as they have done after their recent dominance that they had in 22 and 23. They started off 2024 as they'd ended 2023. It looked as though they were going to walk it again. Obviously that didn't turn out to be the case. McLaren, Ferrari and Mercedes caught them up, and by mid-season Red Bull was struggling. They really did look like they were on the back foot, but they managed to get over the line with at least the Drivers' Championship with Max Verstappen, but obviously they slipped from a comfortable lead in the Constructors' Championship to third place by the end of the season in Abu Dhabi, and I worry that they're going to take a further step back this year. The test wasn't a complete disaster, but I think the car still looks quite difficult to drive and isn't quite giving Verstappen what he really wants. You could tell sort of after the test he was saying that there were some positives, but there's still work to do. So I think this is going to be Max's biggest challenge since he joined Red Bull. How can he get the most out of this car? How can he somehow drag this car into a position where he can actually fight for that championship and retain his crown? Obviously there's going to be a big focus on Lawson to see how he gets on alongside Max. Max obviously will finish ahead, there's no doubt about that, but what's interesting is to see how Lawson gets on. Can he do a better job than Perez did last year? I think he will. I think he's really going to embrace this chance that he's been given. It's a reward for the hard work and for his performances in the sister team. I can see why they picked him. I do think he has that mental resilience. It's just about whether he can translate that onto the track and deliver results. So while it's inevitable that he obviously will play second fiddle to Max, I think he will prove a lot of people wrong and have actually a better season than most people are expecting. Just ahead of Red Bull in P3, I have put Mercedes. I think that coming out of the test actually, Mercedes will be one of the happiest teams. I think they've clearly made progress from last year, and for the first time in this regulation cycle they actually look like they've finally got on top of these regulations. It was about time, wasn't it? I actually think that they came out of that test second quickest, but I just think they're not going to be able to keep that up for the whole of the season. I think in the early races they'll be right there, but I certainly think that they'll drop back at certain stages in the season, not as much as they did last year. I think one of the biggest problems last year was the car would only work in certain conditions. It was so unpredictable. It was so competitive in Vegas, at Spa, at Silverstone, and then at other tracks it would just be absolutely nowhere. So I think that Mercedes have made a big focus on trying to rectify that particular issue, and it does seem that so far they may well have got on top of that. So I certainly think they'll be in the thick of it, and they'll be in with a chance of winning races and may have an outside chance of winning the championship. And then for the drivers, obviously this is Mercedes' first season post Lewis Hamilton, so now Russell has taken over the mantle of team leader with Antonelli coming in, one of the most exciting rookies to ever grace the sport. I do think Russell will have the upper hand certainly for this year. Antonelli yet again in this test has shown that he's very quick but can be a bit erratic, and I think that will maybe be his downfall. There's no doubt that he's definitely going to bin it into the barriers at some point during the season. He's going to make mistakes, but he is super quick, and I'm so excited to see how he gets on. But Russell will have the upper hand and finish ahead in the championship, but I do think that Antonelli will win a Grand Prix at some point this season. That's my bold prediction for him. So we're down to the final two teams, and in second place I have put Ferrari. They obviously are coming into this season with huge expectations. They have one clear target, and that is to end their title drought, but they came so close to ending last season. They just missed out on that Constructors' Championship to McLaren. But obviously there's a major change for this year, and that obviously concerns the drivers. Lewis Hamilton coming on board, partnering up with Leclerc, and that is obviously going to be super exciting. Hamilton, the most successful driver ever, joining Ferrari, the most successful team ever. How is it going to play out? Is Hamilton going to be able to push Leclerc? Is Leclerc going to really show Hamilton who's boss? So many questions, but I think the biggest question of all is, have they got a car that is going to be able to get them over the line? As for now, although I think a lot of people are quite buoyant about Ferrari's test, from what I was reading, actually a lot of people are quite concerned about how they're going to start the season. They actually may not look as competitive as maybe they showed, and that is to do with the fact that they've obviously gone through a change in suspension, and that seems to have actually put them a little bit on the back foot coming into the first race. So that is the downside, but on the plus side, that is believed to be a real benefit to them in terms of car development over the season. It seems that they have a higher ceiling that they are able to develop the car with. So even if they do start the season as the 4th quickest, the scope for them to develop the car over the season and claw back that deficit, there is real potential for that. And then coming on to the battle between Leclerc and Hamilton, I do think that it will be Leclerc that finishes ahead of Hamilton in the championship, simply because he's embedded into that Ferrari team. He knows the team, he knows the car. That will give him some sort of advantage at the start of the year. Hamilton, he's got a huge smile on his face. He's reinvigorated. He's so pumped up for this year, for this new challenge. But it will take him a bit of time to get used to everything. But I certainly think that both can and will win races. But Leclerc, I think, will come out on top in the head-to-head battle between the two. That leaves us with just one team. My Constructors' Champions for 2025 are McLaren. I think that they are going to retain the championship that they won for the first time since 1998 last season. And the reason being is, while pre-season testing wasn't absolutely perfect, I think it was as close to perfect as McLaren could have hoped for. The car looks seriously competitive, particularly on race runs. The race run that Lando did on day 2 was really impressive. So the car looked great over a race run. You expect it will be competitive also in qualifying, even though McLaren didn't really focus too much on quali runs in testing. And then as for maybe potential weaknesses, I think the only real weakness that the car had was rear instability. You saw on a few occasions Lando and Oscar having to really fight the rear of the car. Aside from that, the car looks mega. So I certainly think that McLaren are going into 2025 as the team to beat. So that leaves us with the drivers. Who's going to finish ahead of who? Norris and Piastri. It's such a competitive lineup. They really do push each other. But as to who's going to finish ahead of who, don't underestimate Piastri, but I think that Lando Norris will win out in the end. So that's my prediction as to where each team is going to finish in the Constructors' Championship in 2025, which leaves us with just one more prediction to make. Yep, who is going to be world champion? Now, I thought long and hard about this. I've obviously looked at pre-season testing, who looks quick. I've also looked at who obviously had a good season last year, who maybe will be able to carry that into this year. Now, there's lots of factors involved, but in the end, I have gone with this driver because I think that they learnt a lot from last year, and I think that 2025 is going to be their year, the year that they get over the line and achieve the World Championship. So my driver's world champion for 2025 is Lando Norris. I think that Lando is going to do it. I did give a little bit of a hint as to who the driver was when I said that they learnt a lot from last year, and Lando, I think, really did learn a lot from his title challenge against Verstappen in 2024. He did make mistakes, he got things wrong, and it really did show that he wasn't ready to be world champion. I think coming into this year with a car that looks quick, with the lessons that he would have learnt from last year, we're going to see a stronger, more resilient, better version of Lando Norris. It's going to be close, no doubt, this championship. I think 2025 we're really in for a hell of a season. He's going to face challenges from Leclerc, from Hamilton, from Russell, from Verstappen obviously, and obviously from his teammate Piastri. It's not going to be easy, but I'm going to go with Lando to get the job done and become world champion for the first time. So there you have it, guys. Those are my predictions for the 2025 Formula 1 season. I think it really is going to be a fantastic year for Formula 1. And be sure to let me know in the comment section as to whether you agree with my selection of predictions. Also let me know, what are your predictions? Who do you think is going to be world champion, and what is going to be the order of the Constructors' Championship? But if you are new around here, also don't forget to like the video, and please do subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.